Down to her last $583 in savings and facing eviction, with her 7-year-old daughter, Olivia Caldwell made a desperate gamble on an abandoned Victorian mansion in coastal Maine that locals refused to discuss in polite company. What she discovered behind a hidden bookcase in the library would not only transform her dire financial situation, but unearth presidential secrets that powerful Washington insiders had spent 3 decades ensuring would never see the light of day. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Olivia Caldwell stared at her bank balance on her laptop screen, the harsh glow illuminating her exhausted face in the dimness of her small apartment. $583.27. The number seemed to mock her with its inadequacy. Just 18 months earlier, she had been a respected presidential historian at Georgetown University with a comfortable salary, a charming townhouse in Alexandria, and enough savings to fund a college account for her daughter, Lily. Now at 38, she was working as a part-time archivist at a local historical society, picking up freelance writing gigs whenever possible and calculating which bills could be postponed without services. Being disconnected, the termination had come without warning. Her research into classified communications between the White House and foreign leaders during the 1980s had ventured into territory powerful people preferred left unexplored. Her department chair had called it a budget realignment, but the timing, just 3 weeks after she'd submitted a research proposal on presidential shadow communications, had been suspicious. Her academic reputation had been subtly undermined by whispers about conspiracy theories and questionable research methods. Former colleagues stopped returning her calls, and promising interview opportunities mysteriously evaporated after initial interest. With savings dwindling and no viable prospects in Washington, she'd made the difficult decision to move back to her home state of Maine, where living costs were lower and her daughter could be closer to Olivia's aging parents. "You could stay with us, honey," her mother had suggested during their weekly video call. "Lily would love being close to her grandparents, and there's plenty of room." But pride and a fierce determination to maintain independence kept Olivia from accepting that lifeline. She had built her career on intellectual rigor and historical accuracy. The thought of retreating to her childhood bedroom felt like conceding defeat to the forces that had orchestrated her professional downfall. She was determined to find her own solution, to show her daughter that setbacks were temporary and that integrity mattered more than institutional approval. As she sat at their small kitchen table reviewing the final eviction notice, they had exactly 2 weeks to vacate. Olivia scrolled absently through local property listings on her laptop. Most were well beyond her means, even with Maine's relatively affordable housing market compared to D.C. Then a small advertisement caught her eye. County tax auction, historic properties, starting at $500. She clicked on the link, expecting to find condemned structures or unusable lots. Most of the listings were indeed for dilapidated properties, with starting bids well beyond her meager resources. But one property description made her pause. Harwood Estate, Victorian Mansion, c. 1887, 6800 SQFT on 3.5 acres in Ravens Point. Minimum bid, 500 clone. Significant repairs needed. No inspection available. Property sold with deed restrictions. Public access to shoreline must be maintained. Olivia had grown up near Ravens Point, a small coastal town with a rich maritime history. The Harwood name was familiar, one of the old shipping families whose fortunes had risen and fallen with the tide of Maine's coastal economy. She vaguely remembered driving past the imposing mansion on childhood trips, its once grand facade already showing signs of neglect even 20 years ago. She clicked on the listing photos and frowned. The mansion was clearly in serious disrepair. Peeling, paint, broken windows, overgrown grounds surrounding what had once been formal gardens. The listing mentioned no functioning utilities, outdated electrical wiring, and potential structural issues. Yet beneath the decay, the bones of architectural magnificence remained. Soaring ceilings, intricate woodwork, a sweeping staircase in the entry hall that hinted at former grandeur. "What are you looking at, Mom?" Lily asked, peering over Olivia's shoulder, her dark curls falling forward as she leaned in to see the screen. Olivia almost closed the browser, not wanting to share her desperate considerations with her daughter. But something in Lily's curious expression stopped her. "It's a mansion," she said honestly, "a very old, very broken mansion that's being sold tomorrow." "Like in your history books?" Lily asked, eyes widening with interest. "Similar, yes. It needs a lot of work. Someone lost it to the county for unpaid taxes, and now it's being sold again for very little money." "Could we buy it?" Lily asked with the straightforward logic of a 7-year-old. "You always said you wanted to live in a house with history." Olivia started to explain all the reasons why they couldn't, the repairs, the distance from town, the impracticality of it all, but stopped herself. What were their alternatives? Another overpriced rental that would drain what little remained of her savings, moving in with her parents and admitting defeat. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Olivia researched everything she could about the property. The Harwood Mansion had been built in 1887 by shipping magnate Cornelius Harwood, whose fleet had dominated the transatlantic trade routes during the late 19th century. For the past 40 years, it had belonged to a reclusive businessman named Edward Thornfield, who had purchased it from the last Harwood heir in 1979. Thornfield had been something of a mystery to locals. He had spent little time at the mansion, visiting only occasionally, though property taxes had been paid punctually until his death the previous winter. With no heirs coming forward, the county had finally moved to reclaim decades of back taxes. Through the auction, the more Olivia read, the more her historian's mind was engaged. Edward Thornfield wasn't just any businessman. He had served as a special advisor to 2 presidential administrations in the 1980s. His name had appeared in her previous research, though always on the periphery of major policy decisions, particularly regarding diplomatic communications with Eastern Bloc countries during the Cold War's final decade. Something about the situation tickled her professional instincts. Why would a presidential advisor with Washington connections choose such an isolated and historically significant property, only to leave it largely unoccupied? And why was the county selling it for a fraction of what even distressed historic properties typically commanded? The listing mentioned deed restrictions, but didn't specify what those entailed beyond maintaining public access to the shoreline. By morning, Olivia had made her decision. It was risky, possibly foolish, but it also felt like the only path forward that didn't involve retreat. She withdrew $550 from her account, nearly everything she had, and drove to the county courthouse with Lily buckled into the back seat of her aging Subaru Outback, backpack filled with books, colored pencils, and snacks for what might be a long morning. "Are we really going to buy a mansion today?" Lily asked, her voice caught between excitement and uncertainty. "We're going to try," Olivia answered honestly, "but it's a long shot, sweetheart. Other people might want it too, and we don't have much to bid." As they drove, Olivia couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically her life had changed. 3 years earlier, she had been at the height of her academic career. Her first book, Shadows of Power: Unofficial Channels in Presidential Diplomacy, had been published to critical acclaim by Georgetown University Press. The work, which examined how presidents throughout history had used unofficial emissaries and back-channel communications to conduct sensitive negotiations, had established her as a rising star in presidential studies. Her office at Georgetown had overlooked the historic campus, shelves lined with rare books and presidential biographies. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She'd been surrounded by brilliant colleagues and promising students who challenged and inspired her daily. Her classes on presidential history consistently had waiting lists, and her department chair had fast-tracked her for early tenure consideration. The professional success had been matched by personal stability. After her divorce from Lily's father when their daughter was just 3, Olivia had created a comfortable life in Alexandria. Their 3-bedroom townhouse had been filled with books, art, and the evidence of their travels during university breaks. A small model of the Eiffel Tower, a colorful painting from a street artist in Barcelona, a handcrafted chess set from Prague. Most precious had been her collection of presidential documents and memorabilia, nothing as valuable as what major collectors owned, but meaningful pieces she'd acquired over years of dedicated searching. A handwritten letter from FDR to a cabinet member, a campaign button from Truman's 1948 run, a menu from a state dinner during the Kennedy administration. Each item represented not just her professional interests, but her genuine belief that understanding presidential power was crucial to understanding American democracy. Her reputation in the field had opened doors at presidential libraries and national archives. Museum curators would call for her opinion on the provenance of potential acquisitions. Conference organizers sought her as a keynote speaker. The State Department had even consulted her twice about historical precedents for diplomatic initiatives they were considering. "You were born for this work," her mentor, Professor Emeritus Walter Hammond, had told her after she received the prestigious Monroe Fellowship for her research. "You have the rare ability to see patterns that others miss, to connect seemingly unrelated historical dots into a coherent picture." That ability to see patterns had been her strength and ultimately led to her professional downfall. It had started with a seemingly routine research trip to the Reagan Presidential Library. While examining documents on Cold War diplomacy, Olivia had noticed discrepancies between official meeting records and subsequent policy actions. Small inconsistencies at first, dates that didn't align, references to conversations that weren't documented in official transcripts, decisions that seemed to emerge without the usual paper trail of analysis and recommendation. Intrigued, she had expanded her investigation, requesting additional documents through Freedom of Information Act filings. Most requests were fulfilled with heavily redacted materials, but even the sanitized documents revealed tantalizing hints of an unofficial communication channel between certain White House officials and Eastern European leaders in the late 1980s. Communications that bypassed the State Department and even the National Security Council. The more she investigated, the more evidence she found of a shadow diplomatic structure that had operated alongside official channels. This unofficial network seemed to involve a small group of private citizens with direct access to the president, businessmen, academic consultants, and former government officials who carried messages too sensitive for standard diplomatic pouch. When she presented her preliminary findings at a specialized conference on presidential communications, the response had been enthusiastic from her academic colleagues, but distinctly chilly from the former White House staffers in attendance. One retired NSC official had taken her aside afterward. "You're venturing into dangerous territory, Dr. Caldwell," he'd said, his tone friendly but his eyes hard. "Some doors are kept locked for good reasons. Not all history is meant to be exhumed." She had dismissed the warning as the typical protectiveness of former insiders. 2 weeks later, she'd submitted her research proposal for a comprehensive study of these shadow communications, and the cascade of professional disasters had begun. First, came the notification that her research funding was under review. Then her department chair informed her that her teaching load would be increased, leaving less time for research. A planned sabbatical was postponed due to departmental needs. Journal editors who had eagerly published her previous work now found her submissions not quite right for our current direction. The coup de grace had been delivered in the dean's office on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Budget constraints, shifting departmental priorities, the need to create space for emerging fields of study, all reasonable-sounding explanations for why her contract wouldn't be renewed. The subtext had been clear. She had stepped on powerful toes. Within 6 months, she had gone from rising academic star to unemployable pariah in her field. When even the community colleges and high schools in the D.C. area suddenly found her overqualified for their teaching positions, she understood that the influence of whoever she had offended extended far beyond university walls. Walter Hammond had been blunt when she confided in him. "You've been blacklisted, Olivia. Not officially, that doesn't happen in academia," he'd said with a bitter laugh. "But the effect is the same. You touch something that someone with influence doesn't want touched. Your only options are to publicly recant your research direction or to find another field entirely." Her integrity wouldn't allow recanting research she believed was valid. And after investing 15 years in presidential history, starting over in a new field seemed impossible. So she had retreated to Maine, hoping distance might weaken whatever forces had aligned against her. But as their savings dwindled and opportunities remained scarce, Olivia had begun to wonder if she would ever reclaim her professional standing or financial stability. Now, as she pulled into the county courthouse parking lot, those memories of professional success and subsequent ruin sharpened her determination. Today wasn't just about securing shelter. It was potentially the first step toward rebuilding everything she had lost. At the courthouse, Olivia registered as a bidder and received a numbered paddle. Lily sat beside her in the back row of the auction room, unusually quiet as she sensed the importance of the moment. The auctioneer worked through several properties before reaching the Harwood estate. When the listing appeared on the projection screen, Olivia felt her heart race. This was it, their one desperate chance. "Next we have the Harwood estate on Shore Road in Ravens Point," the auctioneer announced, his voice carrying easily through the high-ceilinged room. Victorian mansion circa 1887, approximately 6,800 square feet on 3.5 acres with 200 feet of coastline. Significant repairs needed. Property sold as is, with deed restrictions requiring public shoreline access be maintained. Opening bid at $500. Do I hear $500? Olivia raised her paddle, her hand trembling slightly. The auctioneer nodded. "We have $500 from bidder 23. Do I hear $600? The room remained silent. Olivia scanned the faces around her, expecting competition, but found only disinterest or even faint expressions of pity. From the corner of her eye, Olivia noticed a woman in a tailored navy suit studying her with unusual intensity. For a moment, Olivia thought she might bid, but she remained still, making a subtle note in a small leather notebook. Going once for $500, going twice for $500, sold to bidder 23 for $500. A wave of emotions crashed over Olivia. Relief, terror, disbelief. She had just spent nearly every dollar she had on a dilapidated mansion she'd never even visited. As she completed the paperwork and handed over the cashier's check, the clerk gave her a curious look. "The Harwood place, huh?" The woman lowered her voice. "You should know there's a reason nobody bid against you." "Because of the condition?" Olivia asked. The clerk shook her head. "That's part of it, sure, but that place has history, strange history. Old Mr. Thornfield spent 40 years keeping people away from that house. Visited maybe 3-4 times a year himself, but hired local security to keep trespassers out. had state-of-the-art alarm systems installed in a house where the plumbing barely works. She leaned closer. And the restriction about maintaining public shoreline access? That came directly from Washington when the property was transferred to Thornfield back in '79, something about historical preservation and coastal access rights. Olivia's historian's mind immediately began processing this information, cataloguing it as potentially significant. The transfer restrictions and a reclusive presidential advisor suggested there might be more to the Harwood estate than an ordinary tax auction property. "I don't believe in rumors," she said with a small smile, "just opportunities for historical research." The clerk shrugged. "Your funeral. Keys are in the envelope along with the property maps and deed. Be careful out there. Cell service is spotty, at best along that stretch of coastline." As they drove the 20 miles to their new property, Lily's excitement grew. Portland gradually gave way to smaller coastal towns, with glimpses of the Atlantic Ocean appearing between stands of pine trees. The late April sun cast long shadows across the landscape, highlighting the rugged beauty of the Maine coast. "Will we sleep there tonight, Mom?" Lily asked eagerly. "Like camping?" The thought hadn't occurred to Olivia. Their apartment still had 2 weeks before the eviction date, but they were paying by the day. Financially, it would make sense to move immediately, even into a house without functioning utilities. "Maybe," she hedged. "We'll need to see what condition it's in first." When they turned onto the long gravel driveway marked by weathered stone, pillars bearing the faded inscription, "Harwood," reality struck hard. The mansion looked even more dilapidated in person than it had in the photos, a 3-story Victorian structure with peeling paint, several broken windows, and a section of roof that had partially collapsed, presumably from heavy snow load during the winter. The surrounding grounds were overgrown with weeds and small shrubs, the formal gardens long since surrendered to nature's reclamation. "It's perfect," Lily declared, unbuckling her seatbelt before Olivia had fully stopped the car. "Wait," Olivia called, but her daughter was already running toward the house, propelled by the boundless optimism of childhood. Olivia followed more cautiously, mentally cataloguing the most urgent repairs. The main structure appeared salvageable, aside from the damaged roof section. The stone foundation looked solid, and many of the decorative elements, intricate woodwork around the eaves, detailed window casings, the grand front porch with its carved columns, remained largely intact beneath years of neglect. The front door was secured with a heavy padlock. Olivia entered the combination from her paperwork, and the lock clicked open. The key was old and ornate, fitting the elaborate door lock that appeared original to the house. "Ready?" she asked. Lily, who nodded eagerly, the door creaked open on rusted hinges, revealing a dust-filled entrance hall. The air inside was stale and musty, with an underlying dampness that suggested water intrusion from the damaged roof. Olivia stepped cautiously onto the marble floor of the foyer, testing for stability before committing her weight. "Hello," Lily called out, her voice echoing through the empty rooms. "We're your new family." Despite her concerns, Olivia smiled at her daughter's immediate claim on the space. They moved slowly through the first floor, a grand entrance hall with a sweeping staircase, a formal parlor with a marble fireplace, a wood-paneled library with built-in bookcases, a dining room large enough to seat 20, and a spacious kitchen with appliances that had to be at least 40 years old. Throughout the house, Olivia noted both the challenges and opportunities. Beneath the layers of dust and neglect, there were hand-carved moldings, inlaid hardwood floors, crystal chandeliers draped in cobwebs, and stained glass windows that still cast colorful patterns across the floors when sunlight struck them. The mansion had good bones, as her father would say, built in an era when craftsmanship mattered and houses were constructed to last generations. "Can this be my room?" Lily asked, standing in a small bedroom off the main hallway that might once have belonged to a lady's maid. Its wallpaper faded, but still showing a pattern of delicate roses. If that's what you want, Olivia agreed, relieved that at least the ceiling in this room appeared solid, with no obvious water damage. They continued their exploration with Olivia checking the utility systems. The electrical panel was outdated, but not immediately dangerous. The water came from a well with a pump that would need inspection. The heating system was an ancient oil furnace in the basement that looked temperamental at best. Behind the house was a stone terrace overlooking what had once been formal gardens, now wild with volunteer plants that had survived the harsh Maine winters. Beyond that stretched the property's grounds down to the rocky shoreline, where waves crashed rhythmically against the coast. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows through the dirty windows, Olivia found herself standing in the library, drawn to the floor-to-ceiling bookcases that lined the walls. Most shelves stood empty, but a few contained leather-bound volumes that appeared to have been too insignificant to remove when the house was last vacated. The room felt different from the others, less neglected somehow, as though it had been used more recently. The leather armchair near the fireplace showed less dust than furniture in other rooms. A desk positioned to take advantage of the ocean view held an antique lamp that seemed incongruously well-maintained compared to other fixtures in the house. "I love our castle, Mom," Lily said, coming to stand beside her, small hand slipping into Olivia's castle. The word made Olivia smile, even as it highlighted the absurdity of their situation. They had just spent their last dollars on a crumbling mansion that would require tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands, to restore properly. Yet standing in the library with her daughter, watching the sunset cast golden light across the Atlantic, Olivia felt a strange sense of rightness. Whatever had led them here, professional sabotage, financial desperation, impulsive decision-making, seemed almost like a pathway destined to bring them to this particular moment in this particular place. "We should head back to the apartment before it gets dark," Olivia said, reluctant to leave but aware of practical concerns. "We'll return tomorrow with supplies and start making this place livable." As they walked toward the front door, Lily suddenly stopped. "Mom, that bookcase doesn't match the others." Olivia followed her daughter's gaze. Lily was right. Among the uniform built-in bookcases lining the library walls, one section appeared subtly different. Though crafted to blend with the Victorian woodwork, its proportions were slightly off, the wood tone a shade darker than the surrounding shelves. "Good eye, Lily," Olivia praised. Her historian's curiosity piqued. She approached the bookcase, examining it more carefully. Unlike the built-ins, this one appeared to be a freestanding unit, positioned flush against the wall. The few remaining books on its shelves were newer than the leather-bound volumes elsewhere in the room, political biographies and presidential histories from the 1970s and early 1980s. "We'll investigate tomorrow," Olivia promised, making a mental note to examine it further. "Right now, we need to get back while we still have daylight." That evening, in their soon-to-be-vacated apartment, Olivia researched everything she could find about Edward Thornfield, the mansion's previous owner. His official biography was impressive but oddly generic. Harvard Law School, partner at a prestigious D.C. law firm, special advisor to 2 presidential administrations, board member for several corporations and foundations. A successful Washington insider who had never married, with no children or close family mentioned in his obituary. What struck Olivia as unusual was the lack of personal details. For someone who had moved in elite Washington circles for decades, Thornfield had left remarkably little personal imprint in the public record. No interviews where he discussed his background, no profiles in major publications, no photographs at high-profile social events despite his connections. It was as if he had deliberately cultivated invisibility while maintaining positions that typically attracted public attention. Even more intriguing were the gaps in his official timeline. During her academic career, Olivia had become adept at spotting what historians called biographical shadows, periods where a person's activities and whereabouts were not accounted for in the public record. Thornfield's biography contains several such shadows, particularly during critical diplomatic moments in the 1980s, when official records indicated he was on special assignment for the administration. As she dug deeper, Olivia discovered that Thornfield had purchased the Harwood estate in 1979, just weeks after returning from a diplomatic mission to Eastern Europe. The timing piqued her interest. It aligned perfectly with a shift in U.S. policy towards several Soviet satellite states, a shift her previous research suggested had originated outside normal State Department channels. "What were you hiding, Mr. Thornfield?" she murmured to herself, the researcher in her already formulating hypotheses about the connection between the mansion and her interrupted academic investigations. The next morning, they loaded their car with camping supplies, basics, tools, and cleaning materials. Before heading to the mansion, Olivia stopped at the Ravens Point Historical Society, a small museum housed in what had once been the town's customs house. If anyone had information about the Harwood estate's history, they would be the ones to ask. The museum was quiet, with only an elderly volunteer sitting at the reception desk. She looked up as Olivia and Lily entered, her eyes brightening at the prospect of visitors. "Good morning. Welcome to the Ravens Point Historical Society. Are you interested in our maritime exhibit? We just added some wonderful artifacts from the clipper ship era." "Actually," Olivia said, "I'm hoping you might have information about the Harwood estate. I've recently acquired the property and am researching its history." The woman's expression changed subtly, a flicker of surprise quickly masked. "You purchased Thornfield's place? Well, that's unexpected. No one's been allowed on that property for decades, except for the caretakers he hired to maintain the grounds and keep people away. I bought it at the county auction yesterday," Olivia explained. The woman studied her with newfound interest. "I'm Martha Caldwell, the Society's archivist. And you are?" "Olivia Caldwell. This is my daughter, Lily." "Caldwell? Any relation to the Caldwells from North Harbor?" "My father's family? My grandfather was James Caldwell." Martha's face softened. "Jamie Caldwell's granddaughter. Well, that's different then. Jamie and I went to high school together. He was a good man." She gestured toward a back room. "Come to my office. I may have some materials that would interest you." Martha's office was a small room crammed with filing cabinets, bookshelves, and boxes of documents. She motioned for Lily to sit at a small table with a puzzle of an old sailing ship, then turned to Olivia. The Harwood family was prominent. Here from the 1880s through the 1950s, Cornelius built that mansion at the height of his shipping empire's success. The family fortune declined after World War II, and the last direct descendant, Elizabeth Harwood, sold the estate to Edward Thornfield in 1979. She pulled a folder from a filing cabinet. "This contains newspaper clippings about the property and the family." Olivia leafed through the documents, noting that very little information existed about the sale to Thornfield or his subsequent ownership. "Do you know why Mr. Thornfield purchased it? From what I understand, he rarely visited." Martha hesitated, glancing at Lily to ensure she was occupied with the puzzle. "There were rumors," she said, lowering her voice. "Nothing substantiated. Mind you, but people talk in small towns." "What kind of rumors?" "That the property wasn't purchased for personal use, but for some government purpose. Military vehicles were seen on the grounds shortly after Thornfield acquired it. Workmen came and went for several weeks, and locals who were hired reported unusual renovations, reinforced rooms in the basement, new electrical systems far more sophisticated than what an ordinary residence would need." "Any idea what government purpose it might have served?" Olivia asked, keeping her tone casual despite her quickening pulse. Martha shook her head. "This was during the Cold War. Some thought it might be some kind of listening post. The property does have an unobstructed view of a major shipping channel. Others suggested it might be a safe house for defectors or protected witnesses. She shrugged. Eventually, people stopped speculating. The property sat mostly empty, Thornfield visited occasionally, and local boys learned the hard way that the security systems were no joke. This aligned with what Olivia had observed about Thornfield's career, his proximity to high-level diplomatic and intelligence operations during a critical period of the Cold War. The mansion could have served as a secure location for sensitive meetings or housing important visitors who needed to remain out of public view. There is one person who might know more, Martha added. Harold Pierce was caretaker for the estate from 1979 until about 5 years ago when his health declined. He's at the Bayview retirement home now. If Thornfield confided in anyone locally, it would have been Harold. Olivia made a note of the retirement home's location. Thank you, Martha. This is extremely helpful. The archivist hesitated again, then reached into a drawer and pulled out a small key. This was donated to our collection by Harold when he retired. It's for a door somewhere in the mansion. He didn't specify which one, just said it might be historically significant someday. She handed the key to Olivia. It probably opens a storage closet or service entrance, but since you're now the owner, the key was small and brass, clearly old, but well preserved. Its design suggested it opened an interior door rather than an exterior entrance. One more thing, Martha said. Local fishermen have reported unusual activity around the cove, below the estate in recent weeks. Boats with no running lights arriving after dark, staying briefly, then departing. Might be nothing. Smugglers have used that coastline for 200 years, but given the property's history, I thought you should know. As they drove to the mansion, Olivia's mind raced with possibilities. Her academic instincts were fully engaged now, connecting Thornfield's Washington career, the mansion's isolated location, the sophisticated security, and the mysterious renovations into a pattern that suggested the property had served some classified purpose related to cold war diplomacy, precisely the subject area that had derailed her career. You look happy, Mom, Lily observed from the back seat. Olivia realized she was smiling. I am happy. This is like a giant historical puzzle, and you know how much I love puzzles. Like the ones you used to solve at your university job? Exactly. Like that? Olivia replied, feeling a surge of excitement that had been absent since her professional downfall. Whatever secrets the Harwood estate held, they might connect directly to the research she had been prevented from completing. A historian's dream of primary source material hiding in her very own house. When they arrived at the mansion, Olivia noticed something different immediately. The broken window on the east side had been boarded up. Someone had been there since their visit yesterday. Stay close to me, she told Lily as they cautiously approached the front door. The lock appeared undisturbed, and when they entered, nothing inside seemed changed. Perhaps the county had sent someone to secure the property after the sale. They spent the morning clearing out one of the smaller bedrooms on the first floor that would serve as their temporary sleeping quarters. Olivia had brought sleeping bags, battery-powered lanterns, bottled water, and enough non-perishable food for several days. By early afternoon, they had established a basic camp in what had once been a servant's sitting room, its location near a functional bathroom, making it practical for immediate occupancy. Can we explore the secret bookcase now? Lily asked, her priority clear, despite the mountain of practical tasks facing them. Olivia smiled. Her daughter had inherited her curiosity, a trait she couldn't help but encourage despite the day's urgent work. 15 minutes of exploration, then back to cleaning, she agreed. In the library, Olivia examined the anomalous bookcase more carefully. Unlike the built-in shelves that seamlessly integrated with the room's Victorian architecture, This unit appeared to have been added sometime in the late 1970s or early 1980s, judging by the construction methods and materials, precisely when Thornfield had acquired the property. In movies, there's always a secret book that opens hidden doors, Lily said, already pulling volumes from the shelves to examine them. Those are just movie tricks, Olivia began, but paused as she noticed something unusual about the bookcases. Construction. The shelving unit was anchored to the wall differently than one would expect, not with visible brackets or screws along the sides, but with an elaborate mounting system hidden behind the decorative molding. She ran her fingers along the edge of the unit, feeling for inconsistencies. Near the bottom right corner, her fingers detected a small depression in the wood, almost unnoticeable unless you were specifically searching for it. "Lily, hand me that flashlight." Under the beam of light, Olivia could see that the depression was actually a small, carefully disguised keyhole. She immediately thought of the key Martha had given her and retrieved it from her pocket. "No way," she murmured, comparing the key to the keyhole. The design matched the period and style perfectly. "Is it a secret door?" "Is it?" Lily bounced with excitement. "Let's find out." Olivia inserted the key and turned it clockwise. A soft click echoed in the quiet room, and the entire bookcase shifted slightly, separating from the wall by about an inch. "It is a secret door," Lily gasped. Heart pounding, Olivia pulled gently on the edge of the bookcase. It swung outward smoothly, revealing a hidden passage beyond. The opening was dark, but their flashlight beam showed a narrow corridor with wood-paneled walls and a hardwood floor. "Stay behind me," Olivia instructed, stepping cautiously into the passage. The corridor extended about 15 feet before ending at another door, this one made of steel with an electronic keypad lock beside it. The technology looked dated, 1980s-era security, but sophisticated for a private residence, especially one where other systems like plumbing and heating had been neglected. "It's like a spy movie," Lily whispered, pressing close to her mother. Olivia examined the keypad. Without the code, there was no way past this door. But the very existence of this hidden passage confirmed her suspicions that the mansion had served some covert purpose during Thornfield's ownership. "We'll need to find the code," she told Lily. "Let's continue exploring the rest of the house first." They spent the remainder of the afternoon conducting a methodical survey of the mansion, Olivia making detailed notes about each room's condition and immediate repair needs. The most urgent issues were the damaged roof sections and several broken windows that left the interior vulnerable to the elements. The electrical system would need professional inspection before they could risk turning it on, and the plumbing produced only rusty sputters when they tested the faucets. But, interspersed with these practical concerns, they found more clues that the mansion had been used for unusual purposes. In the basement, one room had been renovated with modern materials inconsistent with the rest of the house. Acoustic tiling on the ceiling, insulated walls, and the remnants of what appeared to be sophisticated communications equipment that had been removed, leaving only mounting brackets and cable conduits. In the master bedroom, a wall safe hidden behind a painting yielded nothing when Olivia managed to open it using the default factory code. Someone had cleared it out before abandoning the property. But in a forgotten drawer of a desk in the adjacent sitting room, she found a maintenance log for security systems. The most recent entry dated just 3 months earlier, well after Thornfield's death. As evening approached, Olivia set up their campsite in the servants' room, using a camping stove to heat soup for dinner. Lily was exhausted from the day's exploration and fell asleep quickly in her sleeping bag, leaving Olivia alone with her thoughts and the creaking sounds of the old mansion settling around them. In the glow of the battery-powered lantern, she reviewed her notes. The mansion had obviously served as more than just a vacation home for a Washington insider. The hidden passage, reinforced room, sophisticated security systems, and evidence of communications equipment all pointed to some official or semi-official function. Given Thornfield's role as a presidential advisor during a critical period of the Cold War, and her own research into back-channel communications between the White House and Eastern Bloc countries, Olivia was developing a theory. The Harwood estate might have served as a secure meeting location for high-level diplomatic contacts that needed to remain outside official channels, exactly the type of communication her academic research had begun to uncover before she was silenced. If she was right, somewhere in this mansion might be evidence of those meetings, records, transcripts, or other documents that could validate her controversial research and potentially restore her academic reputation. The question was where to look and how to get past that locked steel door. The next morning brought a clear, crisp Maine day. Olivia had barely slept, her mind racing with theories about the mansion's secrets. Over a simple breakfast of granola bars and bottled water, she outlined their priorities for the day. "We need to visit the hardware store for supplies to secure the broken windows and patch the roof," she told Lily. "And I want to speak with Harold Pierce at the retirement home." "The old caretaker?" Lily asked through a mouthful of granola. "Yes. He might know the code to that door, or at least have information about what's behind it." In town, they stopped. First at the hardware store, a family-owned business that had clearly served the community for generations. The bell above the door jingled as they entered, drawing the attention of the older man behind the counter. "Morning," he greeted them. "What can I help you with today?" "I need materials to secure some broken windows and patch a leaking roof," Olivia explained. "I recently purchased the Harwood estate." The man's bushy eyebrows rose. "The Thornfield place, brave woman? That property's been sitting empty since the old man passed." He studied her for a moment. "Name's Frank Mercer. My family's owned this store for 80 years. Olivia Caldwell. This is my daughter, Lily." "Caldwell?" Frank's expression shifted to one of recognition. "Any relation to Jamie Caldwell from North Harbor?" "He was my grandfather," Olivia confirmed, struck again by how quickly connections formed in small communities. Frank nodded, as if this explained everything. "Tell you what, I've got some slightly damaged roof shingles in the back from an order that got rejected. Customer already paid for replacements, so these are just taking up space. You can have them at cost if they'd help get that place habitable." The unexpected kindness brought tears to Olivia's eyes. "That would help tremendously, thank you. Been in this county my whole life," Frank said, waving off her gratitude. "The Harwood estate was once the crown jewel of Ravens Point. Would be good to see it come back to life." He hesitated, then added, "You might want to talk to my brother-in-law, Sheriff Dan Keegan. He's had to chase off trespassers at that property for years. If anyone knows the strange goings-on up there, it's Dan." Olivia made a mental note to visit the sheriff. As Frank helped load the discounted building materials into her car, he paused. One more thing about Thornfield. He wasn't just any retired Washington type. Word around town was he'd been involved in something highly classified. Presidential politics, possibly. Never talked about his work, but sometimes government types would visit. Official vehicles, men in suits, not the usual visitors you'd expect at a rundown mansion in the middle of nowhere. This information aligned with Olivia's observations and heightened her curiosity. Presidential politics would explain the sophisticated security systems and hidden rooms, but why would such operations be based at an isolated mansion in Maine? Their next stop was the Bayview Retirement Home, a pleasant facility overlooking the harbor. The receptionist directed them to a sunroom where residents gathered in the mornings. Harold Pierce was easy to spot, a weathered man in his 80s, sitting slightly apart from the other residents, gazing out at the ocean with the focused attention of someone who had spent a lifetime observing his surroundings. Olivia approached him cautiously, "Mr. Pierce, I'm Olivia Caldwell. I recently purchased the Harwood estate." The old man turned slowly, his eyes sharpening as he took in Olivia and Lily. "Didn't expect they'd sell that place to a normal person," he said finally. "Figured the government would swoop in before it hit public auction." "The county seemed surprised too," Olivia replied, sitting in the chair beside him. "I understand you worked as caretaker there for many years." Pierce nodded. 36 years. Started when Thornfield bought it in '79. Retired when my arthritis got too bad 5 years back. I'm trying to learn about the property's history. Martha at the Historical Society suggested you might be willing to share what you know." The old man studied her carefully. "Why'd you buy it?" "Honestly, I was desperate for affordable housing, and it was the only property within my price range." Pierce's weather-beaten face creased into a smile. "Desperation makes for strange purchases. What do you really want to know?" "The hidden passage behind the bookcase in the library," Olivia said directly. "What's behind the steel door?" The smile vanished. Pierce glanced around the sunroom, then lowered his voice. "Found that already, have you? Quicker than I expected." He sighed. "That room wasn't part of my domain. I maintained the grounds and the main house, kept people away. But that room, that was Thornfield's private space. Only time I went in was when he specifically asked me to check something during his absences." "Do you know the code for the door?" The old man shook his head. "Changed regularly, security protocol." "But you know what's in there?" He looked out at the ocean again. "Records, files, a communication center that would have made the Pentagon jealous, at least back in its day." He turned back to Olivia. "You're not just some random buyer, are you? You knew what you might find." "I'm a historian," Olivia admitted. "Specialized in presidential studies before my career was interrupted. When I saw the connection between the mansion and Edward Thornfield, I suspected there might be historically significant materials there." "Historian," Pierce repeated thoughtfully. "That makes more sense than some random mother with a kid buying a money pit mansion." He studied her face. "Thornfield was involved in something big, presidential-level operations that bypassed normal channels, started during the Carter administration, continued through Reagan. I didn't know details, didn't want to, but I knew enough to understand that what happened in that room affected how we dealt with the Soviets during some pretty tense years." Excitement coursed through Olivia. This aligned perfectly with her research on back-channel communications during the final decade of the Cold War. "The last few months, there's been renewed interest in the property," Pierce continued. "People coming at night, lights in the rooms that had been dark for years. Started after Thornfield died, like they were waiting for him to be gone." "What kind of people?" "Government types, but not the same ones as before. Different agencies, maybe. Competing interests." He fixed her with a steady gaze. "Whatever's in that room, more than one group wants it. You've stepped into something complicated, Dr. Caldwell." Olivia felt a chill at his use of her academic title. "How did you—" "I still read the papers. Your name came up a couple years back when you raised questions about unofficial diplomatic channels. Same channels Thornfield helped create." He leaned closer. "There's a reason you lost your position, and it's sitting behind that steel door in the mansion you just bought." Olivia's heart pounded as Pierce's words sank in. "You're saying the evidence that got me professionally blacklisted might be in my own house?" The old caretaker nodded. "Thornfield kept records of everything, said it was his insurance policy. Toward the end, he started talking about making certain files public. Said history deserved the truth. That's when his health took a sudden decline." "You think his death wasn't natural?" Olivia asked, keeping her voice low. Pierce shrugged. "Man was 87. Heart failure is common enough at that age, but the timing was convenient for some folks in Washington." Before Olivia could ask more questions, a nurse approached, announcing it was time for Pierce's medication. As he stood to leave, he pressed a folded piece of paper into Olivia's hand. "The front door code changes, but the maintenance override doesn't. Building regulations. He winked. For emergencies only, of course. Back at the mansion, Olivia and Lily spent the afternoon securing the broken windows with plywood and plastic sheeting. The materials from Frank's hardware store proved invaluable, allowing them to make the structure weather-tight with limited funds. By early evening, they had created a reasonably secure shelter and moved their camping supplies to a more comfortable room, now that the risk of rain damage was reduced. After dinner, with Lily absorbed in a book by lantern light, Olivia returned to the library. The hidden bookcase door remained slightly ajar from their earlier discovery. She slipped into the passage, flashlight in hand, and approached the steel door with its electronic keypad. The paper Pierce had given her contained a 6-digit code. Taking a deep breath, Olivia punched the numbers into the keypad. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a series of mechanical clicks sounded as locks disengaged, and a green light appeared on the panel. The heavy door swung inward, revealing a room unlike anything else in the mansion. While the rest of the house remained frozen in Victorian elegance, overlaid with decades of neglect, this hidden chamber was a monument to Cold War-era technology. Wood-paneled walls housed built-in shelving units filled with neatly labeled binders and document boxes. A large desk dominated one side of the room, supporting outdated but once state-of-the-art communications equipment, a telex machine, encrypted telephone systems, and early computer terminals. A large safe occupied one corner, while maps of Eastern Europe covered another wall, dotted with pins and handwritten notations. The room had been preserved like a time capsule, the air dry and slightly cool, evidence of environmental controls that had somehow remained functional despite the mansion's general decay. Motion sensors triggered low lighting as Olivia entered, suggesting a separate power system still operated for this secure space. Her historian's training immediately kicked in as she surveyed the room methodically. The documents appeared organized, chronologically, with labeling systems suggesting different projects or operations. Many bore classified markings, though these would have been automatically declassified by now unless specifically extended. One shelf contained folders labeled Blackbird, a code name she recognized from her research into unofficial diplomatic channels. With trembling hands, she removed one of the folders and opened it on the desk. Inside were transcripts of meetings between American representatives and high-level Soviet officials, meetings that had occurred completely outside official State Department channels during periods of heightened Cold War tension. The American representative was identified only as Emissary T, almost certainly Thornfield himself. These documents confirmed what her academic research had only theorized. A shadow diplomatic channel operating with presidential authorization but without the knowledge of most government agencies. The dates aligned perfectly with unexplained policy shifts she'd identified in her research, decisions that had seemed to materialize without the usual paper trail of analysis and recommendation. "This is it," she whispered to herself. "The evidence that got me blacklisted." Further exploration revealed something even more significant. A leather-bound journal sat in the center drawer of the desk, its pages filled with Thornfield's elegant handwriting. It was a detailed personal account of his role in these secret negotiations, including the names of officials who had authorized the back-channel communications and those who had later worked to keep them hidden from historical record. Olivia sat heavily in the desk chair, overwhelmed by the implications. These documents didn't just validate her academic theories, they exposed deliberate efforts by powerful figures to suppress historical truth for political purposes. Some of those individuals still held influential positions in government and academia, including several who had been instrumental in ending her career. The journal's final entries were dated just weeks before Thornfield's death and expressed his growing concern about certain presidential records being permanently sealed or destroyed to protect reputations. He had written about his intention to make selected documents public through a trusted academic source, a plan he had evidently never completed. Olivia realized with sudden clarity that she had not purchased the mansion by chance. Her appearance at the auction, her specific background in presidential history, her previous research that had been suppressed, all created a pattern too perfect to be coincidence. Had Thornfield somehow arranged for her to find these documents? The timing of the tax auction following his death, the lack of competition from government agencies that should have been desperate to secure the property, it suggested planning rather than chance. A noise from elsewhere in the mansion startled her from these thoughts. Probably just the old house settling, but it reminded her of Pierce's warning about continued interest in the property from competing government factions. Quickly, Olivia gathered the most significant documents, the journal, and files related to her previous research, and tucked them into her jacket. She would need to find a secure place to hide them until she could determine how best to use this information. The historical significance was enormous, but so were the potential risks. The same powerful figures who had ended her career might take more drastic measures if they discovered she now possessed concrete evidence of what she had previously only theorized. As she prepared to leave the secret room, something caught her eye. A small safe mounted in the floor beneath the desk, its existence nearly hidden by the furniture's positioning. Unlike the wall safe they had found empty earlier, this one appeared to have been overlooked by whoever had previously accessed the room. Its design was more sophisticated than the wall safe, with both a key lock and a combination dial. Olivia made a mental note of its location. Without the key and combination, she couldn't access its contents now, but its presence suggested there might be even more significant documents secured within, perhaps the most sensitive materials Thornfield had kept as his ultimate insurance policy. Olivia secured the hidden room and returned to check on Lily, who had fallen asleep over her book. Covering her daughter with a blanket, Olivia settled in a nearby chair and began examining the documents she'd taken from Thornfield's office. The journal provided a detailed account of secret negotiations with Soviet officials during the late Cold War period, meetings held at the mansion with the direct knowledge of the president but hidden from the State Department, CIA, and even the National Security Council. Thornfield had served as the primary intermediary, leveraging his status as a private citizen with presidential authorization to conduct delicate negotiations outside official channels. What struck Olivia most was how closely these accounts aligned with the research that had ended her career. The journal mentioned specific policy shifts she had identified in her work, decisions that had seemed to emerge without the usual bureaucratic paper trail. Thornfield's notes confirmed her theories about a shadow communication system operating alongside official diplomatic channels. A car engine outside interrupted her reading. Peering through the curtains, she saw headlights coming up the long driveway. It was nearly midnight, too late for casual visitors. Quickly hiding the documents under a loose floorboard she'd discovered earlier, Olivia moved to wake Lily. "Sweetheart, I need you to wake up," she whispered, gently shaking her daughter. "Someone's here. We need to use our hiding spot." Lily blinked awake, immediately alert. They had prepared for this possibility earlier, identifying a small storage space under the stairs that could be accessed through a servant's pantry. Grabbing a flashlight and her phone, Olivia led Lily to the hiding spot, making sure they left no obvious signs of their presence in the main room. From their concealment, they heard car doors closing, then footsteps on the porch. The front door opened. Someone had a key or knew how to bypass the lock. Flashlight beams swept through the house as at least 2 people moved methodically through the rooms. "Security system's been disabled," a male voice said. "But someone's been here recently. These repairs are fresh. County records show it was purchased 2 days ago," a female voice replied. Private buyer. We're running background checks now. Thornfield's room? Still sealed as far as we can tell. Monitoring system hasn't registered access. Olivia's pulse quickened. The hidden room had a monitoring system that reported access attempts. That explained why government agencies hadn't immediately secured the property. They believed the room remained untouched and were monitoring it remotely. Sweep the house anyway, the woman ordered. If the buyers found anything significant, we need to know. For the next 30 minutes, Olivia and Lily remained motionless in their hiding place as the intruders searched the mansion. The voices and footsteps eventually receded and car engines started outside. Only when the sound of vehicles had completely faded did Olivia risk emerging from their concealment. Are they bad guys, Mom? Lily whispered as they returned to their temporary living space. Not exactly, Olivia answered, trying to find the right balance between honesty and reassurance. They're probably government officials concerned about historically significant documents in the house, like the presidential secrets you were researching before. Exactly like that. Olivia was continually impressed by her daughter's perceptiveness. Some people don't want certain historical information to become public, even though historians like me believe everyone has a right to know the complete truth about our past. The next morning, Olivia drove into town to meet with Sheriff Dan. Keegan, Frank Mercer's brother-in-law. She needed to understand how much local authorities knew about the mansion's history and the continuing interest in the property. The sheriff's office was housed in a brick building that also contained the town's small police force. Keegan was a solidly built man in his 50s with graying hair and observant eyes that assessed Olivia as she entered his office. Ms. Caldwell, he greeted her, gesturing toward a chair. Frank mentioned you'd purchased the Thornfield place. Quite an undertaking. It's Dr. Caldwell, actually, she corrected gently. And yes, it's a significant project, but it has good bones. Doctor of History, if I recall correctly, Keegan said, surprising her. Georgetown University until a couple years back. You've done your homework, Sheriff. Small town. New resident buys our most notorious property. Natural to be curious? His tone was friendly but professional, especially when that property has a history of unusual visitors. That's partly why I wanted to talk with you, Olivia said. I had some unexpected guests last night. They entered the house using keys I don't possess and mentioned monitoring systems I wasn't aware of. Keegan's expression didn't change, but he leaned forward slightly. Did they identify themselves? No. I remained hidden with my daughter until they left. Smart move. The sheriff drummed his fingers on his desk. The Thornfield place has been a law enforcement curiosity for decades. Official vehicles with government plates, visitors at odd hours, security measures excessive for a vacation home. I've chased off trespassers, responded to security alarms, but never been allowed past the front rooms myself. Do you know which government agency was involved? Keegan shook his head. Multiple agencies, from what I could tell. Sometimes they coordinated, sometimes they seemed to be working independently. After Thornfield died, I was contacted by someone claiming to be from the National Archives, saying the property contained historically significant documents that should be secured. Did you believe them? Not entirely. The National Archives doesn't usually send people with sidearms and counterintelligence training. He studied her. Your academic work, it involved presidential history, correct? Yes, specifically unofficial. Diplomatic channels during the late Cold War, and now you've purchased a property owned by a presidential advisor known for his work during that exact period. Keegan raised an eyebrow. Coincidence? I was desperate for affordable housing, Olivia said, which was true but incomplete. Uh-huh. The sheriff clearly didn't believe that was her only motivation. Well, Dr. Caldwell, as the property's legal owner, you have certain rights, but I'd advise caution. Whatever's in that mansion has attracted serious attention from powerful people for decades. If you found something significant, you might consider your next steps very carefully. As Olivia left the sheriff's office, her phone rang, an unknown number with a Washington, D.C. area code. She hesitated, then answered. Dr. Caldwell, this is Thomas Bennett from the State Department's Historical Review Division. We understand you've recently acquired the former Thornfield property in Maine. The voice was polite, professional, but Olivia immediately tensed. No public records had yet connected her name to the property purchase. The paperwork was still being processed. The only way they could know was through surveillance or informants. That's correct, she replied cautiously. Our division is responsible for reviewing historically significant sites and materials related to diplomatic history. We'd like to arrange a meeting to discuss the property and any historically significant materials it might contain. Would tomorrow be convenient? We can have representatives at the property by noon. It wasn't really a question. The government was coming, ready or not, and they wanted whatever secrets Thornfield had left behind. I'll need to check my schedule, Olivia stalled. Can I call you back this afternoon? Certainly, Bennett's tone remained pleasant. We're simply interested in preserving historical materials that might be of national significance. After disconnecting, Olivia drove straight to the hardware store. Frank Mercer was helping another customer, but nodded for her to wait. When they were alone, she spoke quietly. I need a secure place for my daughter for a day or two. Government officials are coming to the mansion tomorrow. Frank's expression darkened. They didn't waste time, did they? My sister's place would work. She runs a B&B about 20 miles inland. No one would think to look there. Thank you. And I need another favor. Is there someone local who understands older security systems? I found a floor safe in the mansion I need to access before these officials arrive. Frank considered this. My nephew Jake, locksmith by trade, but he's got a knack for security systems. Discreet, too. Did some work for Thornfield years back. Within an hour, arrangements were made. Lily would stay with Frank's sister under the pretense of a special overnight visit while restoration work was done at the mansion. Jake would meet Olivia at the property that afternoon to examine the safe. Back at the mansion, Olivia worked frantically to catalogue the documents she'd already discovered, photographing key pages with her phone and creating digital backups. If government agents confiscated the originals, she'd at least have copies of the most critical evidence. Jake arrived promptly at 3, a quiet man in his 30s with calloused hands and observant eyes. He listened carefully as Olivia explained about the floor safe, asking few questions but nodding understanding. Thornfield had me install several systems over the years, he confirmed as they entered the hidden room. But he never mentioned a floor safe. The safe proved to be an older model but sophisticated for its time. Jake studied it carefully, then withdrew specialized tools from his case. This'll take time, he warned. Combinations mechanical, 7 digits. We could drill it, but that might damage whatever's inside. How long to crack it properly? Jake shrugged. 4, maybe 5 hours if we're lucky. These old models have their quirks, but I've opened tougher ones. While Jake worked, Olivia continued examining Thornfield's journal, focusing on entries from the final months of his life. One passage particularly caught her attention. April 17, 2022. Received confirmation today that the Langford documents were among those removed from official archives during the transition. P assures me copies exist in secure location, but I have my doubts. 3 administrations have worked to ensure these particular records remain hidden. The floor safe contains the only complete copy I'm certain still exists. If anything happens to me, instructions with MH will ensure they reach the right historian. MH. Margaret Harwood. Could the last Harwood heir have been involved in Thornfield's contingency plans? And what were the Langford documents that 3 presidential administrations had worked to suppress? Jake's voice interrupted her thoughts. "I've got it," he announced, a note of professional satisfaction in his tone as the safe door swung open. Inside was a single document case, leather-bound, sealed and labeled with a simple designation, Langford Protocol, 1987. With trembling hands, Olivia opened the case. Inside were photographs, transcripts, and a microcassette tape. The first document was a cover memo on White House stationery, marked Eyes Only, President, and dated November 1987. As she read the first paragraph, Olivia gasped audibly. The memo detailed a secret agreement between the U.S. president and Soviet leadership, an agreement made outside all official channels that effectively ended the Cold War months before any public thaw was evident. But the terms of this agreement included controversial concessions that would have been politically devastating if revealed at the time. "This rewrites Cold War history," she whispered. "Everything historians thought we knew about why the Soviet Union collapsed. It's not the full story." The documents confirmed exactly what her research had suggested and what had gotten her. Academic career destroyed. Powerful people had engineered a historical narrative that omitted crucial facts, and they'd silenced anyone who got too close to the truth. By the time Olivia had secured the documents and sent Jake away with heartfelt thanks and a promise of confidentiality, evening was approaching. She drove Lily to Frank's sister's B&B, explaining that Mommy had important work to do at the house that might take all night. "Is it about the presidential secrets?" Lily asked, displaying her uncanny perceptiveness. "Yes," Olivia admitted. "Some. People from Washington are coming tomorrow, and I need to make sure certain historical documents are properly preserved." "Like you did at your university job?" "Exactly like that." She hugged her daughter tightly. "I'll be back tomorrow afternoon, and I'll tell you all about it then." Returning to the mansion, Olivia worked through the night, methodically photographing every page of the Langford Protocol documents and uploading the images to encrypted cloud storage. She created multiple backups, sending copies to several trusted colleagues with instructions not to open them unless they received a specific confirmation message from her. As dawn broke, she heard vehicles approaching. Looking out the window, she counted 3 black SUVs coming up the driveway, far earlier than the noon appointment that had been proposed. Clearly, they had no intention of giving her time to prepare. Quickly, she returned the original documents to the hidden room, but left subtle evidence that she had accessed it, a strategic decision to control the narrative. Then she prepared, in coffee in the kitchen, and waited. The knock, when it came, was firm but not aggressive. Olivia opened the door to find a woman in her 50s, wearing a tailored suit, flanked by 2 younger men with the unmistakable bearing of security personnel. "Dr. Caldwell, I'm Director Eleanor Simmons, Presidential Records Division." Her identification card, however, bore the logo of the National Security Council, not the National Archives. "May we come in?" "Of course." Olivia stepped aside, projecting calm confidence despite her racing heart. "Coffee's fresh if you'd like some." Director Simmons declined with a tight smile. Her companions remained in the entrance hall as she followed Olivia to the kitchen. "You've purchased quite an interesting property, Dr. Caldwell." "The price was right," Olivia replied mildly, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Though the renovation costs will be substantial." "I'll be direct," Simmons said, her professional demeanor efficient rather than hostile. "This property contains materials of significant national security interest. My office is prepared to offer $750,000 for immediate purchase, allowing you a substantial profit while ensuring historically sensitive materials are properly secured." Olivia took a deliberate sip of coffee before responding. "That's a generous offer, Director, but I've only just begun exploring the historical significance of this property." As a presidential historian, I find its connection to diplomatic history particularly fascinating. Simmons's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. You've accessed the secure room. It wasn't a question. This is my property, Director Simmons. I've explored it thoroughly. The materials in that room are classified. Actually, they're not, Olivia countered. I've reviewed them carefully. The automatic declassification rules would have applied 25 years after creation unless specifically extended. There's no evidence of extension notations on any of the documents I've seen. Simmons leaned forward. Dr. Caldwell, there are aspects of diplomatic history that remain sensitive despite technical declassification timelines. The Langford Protocol particularly. She stopped abruptly, realizing she had revealed knowledge of specific documents that shouldn't have been accessible to her if the safe remained unopened. Olivia set down her coffee cup. Interesting that you know about those particular documents, Director. According to Thornfield's records, the Langford Protocol was supposed to have been destroyed during the 1991 administration transition. Yet here you are, specifically concerned about their whereabouts. The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of another vehicle, this one an unmarked police cruiser. Sheriff Keegan entered without knocking, his expression neutral but stance authoritative. "Morning, Dr. Caldwell." "Thought I'd check in, seeing as you have visitors." His eyes catalogued the security personnel without appearing to do so. "Everything okay here?" "Just fine, Sheriff," Olivia replied, grateful for his timely appearance. "Director Simmons from Washington was making me a generous offer for the property." "State, business or federal?" Keegan asked Simmons directly. "Federal," she replied stiffly. "National security matter." "Interesting," the sheriff said, "because I just got off the phone with the actual Presidential Records Division at the National Archives. They have no record of a Director Eleanor Simmons, nor of any authorized operation at the Harwood estate." The tension in the room crystallized. Director Simmons maintained her composure, but her eyes hardened. "Sheriff, this is a federal matter beyond your jurisdiction." "Maybe so," Keegan replied evenly, "but unauthorized impersonation of federal officials is very much within my jurisdiction, as is trespassing on private property." One of Simmons's security men stepped forward, hand moving toward his jacket. Keegan's posture shifted subtly, right hand resting near his service weapon. "I wouldn't," the sheriff advised quietly. "2 deputies are outside, and state police have been notified of possible federal impersonation at this address." The moment, stretched, balanced on a knife's edge, before Simmons raised her hand to stop her colleague. "A misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "Our operation is classified, naturally not listed in public directories. I can provide proper verification from Washington if necessary." "That would be appreciated," Keegan replied. "In the meantime, I'll need to see identification from everyone present." While this exchange unfolded, Olivia's phone vibrated with an incoming text message. Glancing down, she saw it was from a Washington, D.C. number she didn't recognize. "Dr. Caldwell, this is Michael Harrington, Special Counsel to the Presidential Historical Review Board. Be advised that individuals claiming federal authority at your property are not authorized representatives. Do not surrender any materials. Legitimate representatives en route. ETA 30 minutes. Olivia made a split-second decision. "Director Simmons, while the sheriff verifies your credentials, perhaps you'd like to explain exactly which documents concern you so urgently. The Langford Protocol specifically, or Thornfield's complete records of back-channel negotiations." Simmons's eyes narrowed at the direct challenge. "All materials related to unofficial diplomatic communications during the relevant period are potentially sensitive because they contradict the official historical narrative," Olivia pressed, "or because they implicate still active political figures in deliberate historical revisionism. You're treading in dangerous territory, Dr. Caldwell." "I've been there before," Olivia replied calmly. "It cost me my career once. I won't let it happen again." The confrontation was interrupted by the distant sound of helicopter rotors. All heads turned toward the windows as a sleek black helicopter approached, bearing official government markings. "Your backup?" Keegan asked Simmons skeptically. Her expression indicated otherwise. The next 30 minutes unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance of power. The helicopter delivered a silver-haired man in his 60s, accompanied by two staffers, carrying official documentation. Michael Harrington, special counsel to the Presidential Historical Review Board, moved with the confident authority of someone accustomed to navigating high-level political situations. Credentials were examined, phone calls made to verify identities, and eventually Simmons and her team were escorted from the property by Sheriff Keegan, who promised a thorough investigation into their claims of federal authority. Left alone with Harrington in the mansion's library, Olivia finally asked the question that had been building since his arrival. Who exactly was she, and what did she want? Harrington sighed, suddenly looking older. Eleanor Simmons works for a private foundation with deep connections to former administration officials. People who would prefer certain aspects of Cold War history remain buried. They've been systematically removing documentation of back-channel negotiations from public archives for decades. "The same people who destroyed my academic career," Olivia stated. "Yes, when Thornfield died, they believed all remaining evidence of the Langford Protocol had been secured. Your purchase of this property and your background in precisely the historical period in question set off alarm bells throughout Washington." "It wasn't coincidence, was it?" Olivia asked. "My finding this place just when I needed affordable housing, the lack of competition at the auction, the key from the Historical Society." Harrington smiled slightly. Edward Thornfield was many things, but above all, he was methodical. In his final years, he became concerned about the systematic erasure of historical truth. He arranged a contingency plan to ensure his records would reach the right historian if anything happened to him. And I was the right historian. The idea seemed incredible. Your published work on presidential back-channel communications caught his attention years ago. He admired your methodological rigor and courage in pursuing politically inconvenient historical truths. When your career was sabotaged, he recognized the same forces at work that he had been documenting. Harrington paused. Thornfield amended his will 3 months before his death, creating a complex legal mechanism to ensure this property would eventually reach you. The revelation left Olivia momentarily speechless. Her desperate purchase hadn't been chance. It had been the culmination of a years-long plan by a man she'd never met, a presidential advisor who had operated in the shadows but ultimately wanted the historical truth revealed. 3 months transformed the Harwood estate beyond recognition. The Presidential Historical Review Board had deployed resources with remarkable efficiency, bringing in specialized crews that worked around the clock to renovate the mansion while establishing proper archival facilities for Thornfield's extensive records. Olivia stood on the newly restored veranda, watching Lily race across the sprawling lawn that had been reclaimed from years of neglect. In the distance, the Atlantic sparkled under the summer sun, waves breaking against the rocky Maine coastline that was now permanently protected public land. "The last of the climate control systems is operational," Michael Harrington said, joining her on the veranda. "The archival storage rooms now meet all preservation standards. I never imagined this outcome when I spent my last $500 at that auction," Olivia admitted. Her life had undergone a transformation as dramatic as the mansion itself. The Historical Review Board had not only funded the property's complete restoration, but had appointed Olivia as the official curator of the Thornfield collection, a position that came with academic reinstatement, a generous salary, and most importantly, the opportunity to correct the historical record she had once been punished for questioning. The Langford Protocol documents had proven even more significant than initially apparent. Beyond revealing secret agreements that helped end the Cold War, they documented systematic efforts by powerful political figures to control historical narratives for personal advantage, efforts that continued to the present day. The first group of visiting scholars arrives next week, Harrington reminded her. The academic community is still buzzing about your article in the Historical Review. That article, meticulously documented with evidence from Thornfield's archives, had sent shockwaves through academic and political circles. It had vindicated Olivia's earlier research, while revealing the extent of historical revisionism that had occurred around the end of the Cold War. Several prominent political figures had been forced to respond to questions about their involvement in suppressing historical truth. And the educational center? Olivia asked. Construction begins next month. By next spring, we'll be hosting student groups and public education programs about presidential history and the importance of archival preservation. The vision that had emerged went far beyond personal vindication. The Harwood estate was being transformed into a center for historical truth, a place where scholars could access previously suppressed documents, where students could learn about the complexities of presidential power, and where the public could engage with unvarnished historical reality. "Mom, come see what I found." Lily called from the gardens, where archaeological work had uncovered original Victorian landscaping features beneath decades of overgrowth. As Olivia went to join her daughter, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them here. From the brink of eviction to curating a presidential archive of national significance, from professional exile to academic leadership. From desperate single mother to respected historian whose work was reshaping understanding of presidential history. The mansion that had once represented her last desperate gamble now stood as a monument to historical truth and the power of persistence. The presidential secrets hidden within its walls hadn't just transformed Olivia's personal circumstances, they were transforming the nation's understanding of its own history. "Sometimes disaster leads to discovery," she murmured, recalling words Thornfield had written in his journal. Complete financial disaster had led to complete professional rebirth through a single, desperate choice made with nothing left to lose. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.